Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and I'm here with the editors of a really absolutely stunning collection of stories. I enjoyed this book so much, and I'm so excited to talk to you. May I please ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Well, my name is Lee Murray, and I'm an author, editor, poet, screenwriter, and essayist from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And the book we're talking about today is Black Crane's Tales of Unquiet Women, which is a text that I edited with my colleague, Geneve Flynn. So go ahead, Genevieve.
Hi, I'm Geneve Flynn. I'm a short story author, editor and poet now, and also essayist. And I'm from Brisbane, Australia. And between us, Lee Murray and I have collected a couple of awards and nominations. And I think it really all started with this collection with Black Cranes.
Yeah, this collection is really, as I said, stunning. It has so many really just amazing writers who approach horror from such different directions and explore such different themes. And I'm wondering, before we get to that, if we could talk a bit about, how you came together to edit this collection and maybe how it suggested itself or how it came to you, because I'm curious about, whether you had a theme in mind and then contacted people according to that theme, or if you sort of let the works that were submitted to you kind of guide the collection. So if you talk a little bit about, how it came to be.
It was really one of those moments where you can kind of feel something happening. The moment that Lee and I met in person, I think we both realized that this was something special. And we both turned up far too early, as conscientious Asian women do, to a panel at a conference in Brisbane called GenreCon. This was in 2019. And I'd known of Lee, but we hadn't actually met in person. And I thought, I have to go and introduce myself. And then we started chatting, and I think then we kind of realized, didn't we, Lee, that that we didn't see very many stories that reflected our experiences. Where were the stories by Asian women of horror? And we realized we're the black sheep. We're the black sheep of the literary family that people kind of tuck in the corner, and we don't speak of that cousin. Lee just turned to me, and she had that. I always tell this story, but you did have that wicked gleam in your eye, Lee, and you said,
"We should that all the time." That wicked gleam. It was a defining moment for me, though, Genevieve, that recognition, here's another Asian woman in horror. And, we'd both turned up to this panel early because we have that ingrained in us, that cultural thing of being conscientious and punctual and serving the community and making sure we were, representing. And so here we are, 20 minutes early, standing around waiting for this panel. And of course, that we both were we were both influenced by those cultural norms, and so of course we got to chatting about that. I think I asked Genevieve, could she back a trailer, or those old Asian tropes, and then we started saying, where are those other Asian women in horror, and we'd love to see those perspectives be lifted, and because it's not something that we'd seen. I mean, I've said this before, and I'm sure Genevieve will agree that we didn't really see ourselves reflected in fiction growing up, and certainly not in horror. And what a great place to start. Horror is always been has always been subversive and transgressive and very progressive. I mean, it's women who've kind of founded the genre to a large extent. And so I feel we sort of, where is this? There's this big gap. Where are these women? They must be there. And so we went out looking, and we knew of a few. And the result was Black Cranes, and we couldn't be more proud, could we? Jennifer, has just been an incredible whirlwind of groundswell, and oh, here's another one. Here's another fantastic Asian woman writer, and what is she writing? And it just kind of kicked everything off for us, the two of us, and the book itself. Who knew? I think the world was hungry for these narratives because, as Genevieve said, we're between us, we've managed to pick up a Bram Stoker Award for this collection, a Shirley Jackson Award for this collection. It was shortlisted for British Fantasy and Aurealis and the Australian Shadows Award, and a number of other long list nominations. So certainly the word got out, and I just think that was because people were just so hungry for something they hadn't seen before, something fresh, with a new perspective and some new voices.
I love that. I love well, first off, I love horror so much as a genre. I have loved it since I'm a child, and I love just encountering voices in it that I haven't heard before. And there were so many great stories in this collection. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you individually came to horror, like how did you come to, encounter it and get involved in it? And maybe what it was like editing a volume like this around sort of something new, because you're breaking new ground, and how do you approach that?
Sorry, Lee, I jumped in.
You go ahead.
Yep.
You go ahead. I'll think about what I'm going to say.
Okay. I like to think that my introduction to horror was when I was in a teen, and my friend handed me Stephen King's It. And she said, you have to read this. And I read it. I think I inhaled that book in a couple of days. But I do think that it probably started a little bit earlier, just because I grew up in Malaysia, and that veil between the spirit world and the real world is much thinner. And it's kind of taken for granted that the supernatural world is there, and that we have my mum was always telling us stories about the kitchen gods, and all the different entities, and then it would be mixed in with the indigenous Malaysian culture as well, all the different aspects about the spirits that kind of walk around among us. And I remember reading a comic called Lao Fusha, Old Man Q. And one of the main themes I didn't realize until I was looking through some of the earlier influences that I had was that a lot of it dealt with the supernatural as a given. It was just part of their lives. And I think that's probably where it started. But I mean, which kid didn't get given a copy of Greek myths and read about all those type of cyclopses and things like that, but also the Bible, the children's Bible, where there's a choice of you can have your baby whole, or you have to share it and cut it in half. So
leave it in two. Exactly.
Yeah, I think it starts quite early. Lee, did you want to talk about how you got it? And then
for me, I think I read everywhere as a kid. I read everything, voracious reader. And in New Zealand, we got mostly UK kind of stories. We our school curriculum, for example, ran alongside the British system. So it was largely influenced, sort of that colonial influence. I never saw anything that reflected my experience. And when I started writing, I kind of thought, I fell into that whole write what you know thing. And at the time I was a marathon runner. I'd been doing some ultras and things like that. very old and broken now, so I don't do that anymore. But at the time, I thought, okay, write what you know. So I wrote this my first novel, to be honest, was a chick lit novel. And of course, I didn't know that chick lit was kind of dead in the water as a genre at that point. But so I wrote this story about what I knew. And then I realized, and I don't regret that book. It was a fantastic learning ground. I learned about how to write a novel and how to write dialogue and what not to do, all the things not to do. It was way too long and it's very wordy. And in any case, I wrote this chick lit, but I learned through the process of that I didn't want to write about, being desperate to have cupcakes and what happens when your wardrobe falls to pieces on you and that kind of thing. I didn't want to write about those things. I wanted my conflicts to be deeper and more important, and significant. And so kind of that leads you to horror. I mean, I think horror is a grown-up genre. It is the thing that addresses all of the things that we are frightened of. And for women, everyday life is frightening. Everyday horror is just domestic abuse and the Me Too movement and just general even just the fact that we're just not listened to. A woman's voice is not listened to, is not heard. So already horror was just like a natural progression for me. This was where I was going to go because I wanted to address conflicts that were important to me and important to women, important to people around me. And horror is very effective. So basically it's about, everybody's fears are different. And so horror is about generating fear in the reader or the consumer of the work. And so my fears are different from your fears, who are different from somebody else's fears, based on our geography and our upbringing, our culture, our age, all of those sorts of things. And so, for me, I wanted to address all of those issues that were the things that were frightening me, and just horror just seemed the right place to do it. And wonderful thing about horror is it's very welcoming for new voices, and it's very progressive. The community is, hey, come on in, we've got a space for you because we're all weird. We're all othered, we're all a bit different. And so, it seemed like a logical progression for me. So then I started reading more widely in horror. I mean, I had read some King and, obviously, I read the more mainstream, but I thought, oh no, now I need to read these other voices. And so that was kind of the dawning for me. It was sort of came at it through writing more so than through reading.
I love that so much. And, something that I thought about a lot while I was reading this collection, before I was in libraries, I was in grad school doing gender studies and history and stuff like that. And I particularly worked on like the intersections of gender and ethnicity and religion and things like that. And, something that I remember reading all the time was that women of color and women of marginalized identities are sort of quote unquote othered within a society twice, like from their status as women and from their status as members of different religions or ethnicities or what have you. And this story, all of the stories here engaged with that in such interesting ways. When you were sending out calls for authors, like how did you approach that? Like, did you approach people who you had in mind already, or did you sort of put out calls through different sources to invite voices in? Like, what was the process of collecting the stories like?
I think it was mainly by invitation. That there were a couple of names that we knew, and one was through meeting somebody in the toilet line at a conference. Conference is a great place. It's for meeting
toilet. Wonderful. We started our anthology in the toilet. Lovely.
It wasn't quite we didn't quite start it that way. Lee and I weren't in the toilet line, but I met Grace Chan, who is a gorgeous writer. She writes beautifully, And I just want to give a shout out. She's released her book, Every Version of You, which is up for the New South Wales Premier's Prize. And it's a beautiful book. And I'd read some of Grace's work, and I thought I'd love to have a story from her. And so I approached her. But some of it was just, trawling through, trying to find people that kind of met what Lee and I were looking for. And now Lee's saying that now we're discovering more and more voices, and it's been so exciting. But when we started, it was a little bit tricky, wasn't it, Lee, to find many
where
people.
were they all? They weren't visible, and I think that's been the real defining thing about this anthology, is that we suddenly, here's a place to start, and then it just grew with, oh well, we should have had this person, and please will you do a Black Cranes too, because what about all these other fabulous voices? So we kind of did a bit of we did a lot of research, Genevieve and I, and we looked around and said, who do we want? And then, of course, it was who was available at the time, because, people have commitments and other things. And so, and also you needed to be a little bit brave, because this was new. And we were saying, these are our themes. This is what we're looking at. This is what we want to do and achieve. Are you interested? And it required a little bit of bravery to step forward and say, okay, I will be seen in this group and who are you? That's the other thing, who are you two women? We don't know you. We're kind of nobodies, Genevieve and I. And so it was like, well, who the heck are you? And can I trust you with this really? And I am so grateful that they did, because they didn't really know whether we could deliver, and help them polish those stories to something special and bring together a collection that was cohesive and powerful, and really, because we needed a little bit of bravery and courage, I think, to do that. So when we approached them, I mean, some of them said, just hell yes, I've been waiting for this for so long, and it's about time, and why didn't someone ask me before now? But also there was like, oh, and I might not have done this if you hadn't been you, like if you hadn't been two Asian women author editors come together and say, let's do this and let's create a community. And the sisterhood that's grown out of it has been just mind-blowing. The generosity of spirit and the kindness and the support of these women has been fantastic. I just can't praise them enough for the way they've come together as a group and understood the messaging and really signal boosted so we can bring other women into the community. So yes, it was, to start with, it was by invitation, but now they're just people just sending us stuff. Hey, have you heard of this person? And have you heard of this person? And we need to read more of this. And so kind of Genevieve and I have turned into these kind of, we're just the conduit for, more of this work, which I am so proud of. I'm so proud to be part of the movement. So yeah, it was to start with, it's by invitation, but that's kind of snowballed now. I think if we were doing it now, we probably have to do a submission call, because we would get quite a lot of work, and in such a big variety and across a lot of Asian cultures. So yes,
Yeah,
the way we approached it would change, I think, now.
But because it's grown so much, like you're saying, it's a groundswell movement. Even if we don't do another Black Cranes, or we can't fit everybody in, there have been so many projects that have kind of stemmed off of this original anthology that it seems like we're creating, everybody in this community is creating space for these voices and championing them, which is really, really exciting. We had a poetry collection, Tortured Willows, Bent Bound Unbroken, and that one was with Angela Yuriko Smith and Christina Singh. And Lee and I we call ourselves baby poets. Me, I was very, very newborn, because I had never written any poetry before, and Lee and Angela and Christina invited me and said, come in and write poetry about these experiences. and we did, and it won the Bram Stoker for dark poetry. And then with the recent collection of essays, Unquiet Spirits, that Lee and Angela have edited, and it was just recently released. And again, it's that groundswell, and we seem to have gathered more and more voices, and that there are more and more avenues for us to express our experiences, which is so exciting. I think that even if we you know even if we kind of step back a little bit, I think that the movement, it has gathered so much momentum that it'll just keep going.
I love that.
I hope so.
Yes.
It's so great. And I'm so glad that Yuli brought up bravery before, because I think that is such an essential concept here. Like, it was an act of bravery to reach out. It was an act of bravery for the writers to respond and like trust you with their work. But also, like, bravery is really wrapped up, I think, in horror. Like, we talk all the time about like fear and horror, but it's like just as much about bravery in some cases, because like it's about confronting horrors, like not not avoiding them, not and yeah, was that like, can you talk about maybe the submissions that you got and the stories that appear here, because they are so diverse in terms of the subject matter, in the times that they take place. They're in the past, they're in the present, they're in like this light future, and so many different cultures and so many different myths appear. Were you surprised by anything that you received, or was there was there anything that really challenged your notions of horror and the possibilities of the genre? I know it's a very big question, but
It's a good question, and I think the fact that we're both Asian writers and women ourselves meant we straight away recognized and the concepts addressed in these stories, and they resonated immediately. And I remember sending a note to Genevieve and saying, "Oh my God, I wish I'd written this." That's the kind of feeling that we had. Oh my God, they get it. We oh my gosh, they were just incredible. Christina Singh wrote us the first novella she's ever written, the longest piece she's ever written. We went, "Oh, whoops, Christina, we're gonna have to edit this down because it's like a whole 10,000 words more than everybody else has written." And it's and we're hoping she'll develop that later into something else. So we're just waiting to see that. Nadia Balkan sent us this Indonesian magical realism, just this incredible fantasy tale, which just blew my mind, to be honest. I really wanted, I hadn't read that story before, and I just really wanted it to be one of mine. As Genevieve said, Grace Chan came along with some wonderful contemporary stories. We had this wonderful story from Elaine Kiyuking, and her story went on and won the Eugene Foster Award for othered writing. So that was an incredible achievement, and that's a very science fiction sort of speculative tale, with a sort of science sort of basis, of science fantasy, if you like, and wonderful, beautifully written story. And then we had Rena Mason come along and do a folklore, a foxtail folkloric story with the ninth tale. So that added that lovely historical dimension. And of course, Rena already was an established writer of Asian, of horror. So we knew already her work would be strong, but this was out of character for Rena. She hadn't written anything like this, and she was worried that it wasn't quite going to be fit the bill, and it wasn't her the flavor of work she'd normally done. So she was super excited, and I know you'll agree, it's really gritty and beautiful and has that lovely historical flavor. So we were a little bit lucky with the range that we got. Genevieve gave us an incredible story that we finished, Little Wern, that we finished on with the Kwikia, which was a whole area of cultural understanding that that, you know, generational trauma, but also that particular piece of mythology, the Queequeg, that I didn't know a lot about. And so Genevieve introduced me. I could get it. I totally got it, the story when it came, but just that whole, you know, introduction to something, to a cultural concept that lots of people perhaps didn't, you know, hadn't seen before. So, you know, there were these opportunities, and one of my own stories addressed food. You know, that is a real area of horror for lots of people. How can you eat that? Oh my God, you know, yuck, the chicken's fat, who would eat those, you know? So there's elements that are, I guess for Black women, it's hair, isn't it? Those kinds of things, you know, the sorts of things that are associated with certain groups. So we were just, I'm going to say we were just blown away, because every time we got something and we went, oh, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, Gabriella Lee's story, I mean, that was so dark but so beautifully written, and just playing with the shifting timelines, and again, I think allowing us to have some understanding of some of their cultures and some of their experiences as well, because she was writing about the experiences of women in the Philippines. And so, I mean, we kind of get lumped into, we're all monolithic Asian women, and so we're, you know, but there are so many varied experiences within that. And I think that's what was delightful about the stories that we were getting all of these perspectives, and getting a chance to say, you know, these are all of the individual experiences, and even one Filipino woman's experience will be different from the next, and one Chinese Malaysian person's experience will be different from the next. So that was really, really exciting.
Yeah, what you just have been talking about touched on something that was brought up earlier about how, you know, fear and horror are so culturally and socially constructed. And there's something that's so interesting about how that balances with the fact that, like, fear is an almost universal emotion, if not like an instinct, you know, something that everybody is like born knowing how to feel, you know.
Yeah.
And like that, but the balancing that universality with the particularity of these stories and the voices is such a beautiful balancing act. And it's what to me makes short stories so miraculous, because you are doing it all with such like brutal narrative efficiency, you know, like it is, you don't have the space of a novel to really like relax into your themes, and you are, it's like, it's so impressive to me.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, we're a little bit lucky with the extraordinary talent of the women that are involved in this group, you know. But yes, it's all about efficiency, as you say, and getting the whole story into a very short word count. But also, yes, you're right. These women leaned into that universal fear while still highlighting those cultural aspects, which I think was the fresh part. You know, everyone could get it, but there were also these new ideas and perspectives that brought to the fore. So I think you've hit the nail on the head, Jen. I think that is part of what gives the collection so much power. It is accessible to everyone, and everyone will get something from it, but it is also fresh and new.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of feedback, wonderful feedback from readers who aren't Asian women, and they said, you know, oh my God, I love this collection, or it's brought a fresh understanding for them to our experiences, and that's been particularly wonderful, especially because, I mean, we released it just before COVID-19 hit.
No,
actually,
we released it in
was
the middle of COVID.
in the middle.
We were writing it in COVID. Yeah,
Yes.
at the beginning of the pandemic. Sorry, you'll have to cut that word out because YouTube doesn't. We were writing it in the middle of the pandemic, and you know, we actually got some notes from our contributors. You know, this is even more important now. You know, the
Yes.
flavor, the way things were going, they just said, look, it's just even more important. Angela Eureka Smith wrote me a note and said, I am banging the keys. I'm so angry because there was so much hate and mistrust around Asian cultures because of, you know, rhetoric around the pandemic. And so we had talked about, you know, putting it off and postponing it because, you know, everything was so difficult for small presses at the time. And our publisher at the time said, well, you know, like, I don't know how we're going to get this out and it's going to be tricky. And the contributors kind of were saying to us, no, this is even more important now. You know, we need to do this now. And so perhaps the pandemic was a plus for us. You know, how can, you know, it's a silver lining of the pandemic, if you like. I mean, perhaps it did mean people were sitting at home. Maybe they were looking for, you know, new ways to deal with what we were all going through, isolation and otherness and feeling, you know, disconnected from people. And so people were looking for ways into, you know, how can I make that connection, you know, and understanding. So maybe that served us. So perhaps it didn't serve us in terms of getting the book out there as much as we might have liked. It certainly got, you know, we were surprised by the reach of it, weren't we, Genevieve?
We were, and I think it like you talk about bravery, and I think we had to be a little bit brave to release it when we did, but it also felt very important to be doing it at that time. And the response has been incredible and very, very heartening, because there are people that are saying, we see you and we're with you. And I think in a little way, Black Cranes was part of that, because it's opening up our experiences. We're not that monolithic Asian woman, and we don't fit the stereotypes. Well, the conscientious Asian woman we do, but that we can't be lumped into this faceless, I think, category.
Well, we're not all the tiger women, or we're not
Yeah.
all the tiger mums, and we're not all these sexy, you know, exotic oriental types. You know, we're all such a mix of, you know, of desires and needs and, you know, ambition and all of that kind of thing. And so, yeah, exactly, we're very diverse even within that sort of Asian umbrella. I think that in terms of the response, you know, if you could just see some of the messages between Genevieve and I, we would be crying. I mean, I know I'd be going, I'm crying here, you know, and Genevieve would be right, I can't believe it, you know, because we just we knew there was a gap and we knew we wanted to fill it, but we just did not know that other people needed us to fill it. And that, I think, was just so surprising to us. And we knew we had, once we got those stories and we knew we had something special, we knew these were fresh and sharp kind of, you know, narratives, but we just had no idea the response that we would get. And so the two of us, typing away in our messages, love hearts. I mean, if you could just see our messages, just thank goodness no one can see our messages, because, you know, we're going, oh my God. But it has been like that. It's been a couple of years like that, hasn't it, Genevieve? We're just still, we still can't believe it, you know.
Yeah, and the response just continues to grow. I think the response and the reach, and that's been incredible. And that like I said before, the projects that have kind of launched from this little book that we started in 2019, that was it's like I said, it's just that when you feel like there's something important happening and you're not quite sure, but then it's surprised me each time. And we call it the little book that could, because
but I think it's true that for us as well, it's been a personal experience. You know, Genevieve and I could not be more grateful for her friendship and her support as a colleague and a friend, but also, you know, for us personally, you know, we've we've launched our careers a little more on the basis of this. We've both been writing in horror for a while, but this was kind of groundbreaking. But also in our families, the discussions that I'm having with my mother and also my daughter. I mean, my daughter appears in Unquiet Spirits, and that was like a surprise. She wrote an essay. She's my editor, so she edited my essay, and then on the back of that just wrote her own one. And we hadn't invited her to this anthology at all, so it was kind of so I mean, but it was a conversation in writing between a mother and a daughter, and so that was nice to be able to include that in Unquiet Spirits. And then Genevieve's essay in Unquiet Spirits, so we're going further from Black Cranes. Genevieve's essay is a dialogue with her mother, which is just absolutely beautiful. In terms of trauma and familial piety and responsibility, there's those aspects which come through very strongly in Genevieve's story, and that sort of holding on to grief, though just extremely powerful themes, of course. And then when I think about Angela Eureka Smith, who's in Black Cranes and Tortured Willows, and my co-editor for Unquiet Spirits, she started a dialogue with her mother and completely discovered her Shimanchu heritage. She had thought she was Japanese, and in fact she's Shimanchu, and it's just completely, thrown her world open, and to understanding herself and all of these things she knew about herself, but couldn't sort of reconcile with what she knew about her heritage. And then all of this new information came to light as a result of her doing some research and opening a dialogue with her mother, because Asian women have been taught not to speak. There are things there are so many secrets in Asian families, and they're held by Asian women because we must not tell these terrible things. And Black Cranes has allowed us to be brave again and open these conversations with people who, people in our families, extended families, with aunts and sisters, and and even, we've even had, say, Christy Kulski talking to her mother who died when Christy was only 5, because she hasn't had this dialogue. So she's writing stories to her mother and trying to discover her mother and more of her mother and herself through her writing. Well, wow, wow, is that powerful or what? So when we talk about the way this book has transformed lives, Christy, for example, she wrote the foreword for Tortured Willows, but when she read Black Cranes, so this is the new cover for Black Cranes, by the way, beautiful. When she read it, she said, "Oh, this was the book I never knew I needed," and I feel seen. And that is kind of what it's about, isn't it, Genevieve? It's that feeling seen. And it's not just us, it's our families and our aunts and our sisters and our daughters, and the wider community. So groundswell is the only way to describe it, really. It's just hugely uplifting. And we keep saying this, and people, I don't know if people get it, what it means to us. It's just, it feels like the turning point. The Black Cranes is kind of the turning point in my career and my life's work, really. I feel like everything I'm writing since then has been this, and as Genevieve said, more projects. Genevieve's writing a novel called The Red Dowager.
The Red Dowager. It'll probably change by the time I'm finished.
And it's about Chinese woman pirate, just incredibly new, fresh narrative that we haven't seen before. So I cannot wait to read it. I keep saying to her, hurry up and write the damn thing.
I'm doing. But I think something that you touched on, Lee, is really important. You're saying it's not just us, but it's our families. And that essay that was kind of like a conversation with my mum, I really feel like it was probably the first time that she's been given, maybe permission's not the right word, but feels like there's a space where she can talk about something that was quite traumatic in her life and how it's affected her, and also for her to conceptualize it, for her to think things through and maybe come to a little bit of peace. And I think that's been incredibly important. She's read some of my work, and it was, for me, it was very brave to show my mother this essay, but also the short fiction that I've written, because she doesn't like horror, and but I think she recognized the themes and some of the things that we're exploring, and she's very proud of that. But just for these women, like Lee said, that have had to be silent, for them to feel like this is a moment that I'm being seen, I'm being recognized. Like Lee, you tell that story of your mum going to see, was it Mao's Last Dancer?
Yes. So
yeah.
back in the day when that movie Mao's Last Dancer came out, my mother is she's Chinese, but she was born here in New Zealand, and she's nearly 80. So so that gives you kind of some perspective. So she went to see Mao's Last Dancer, and when she was a little girl, she went back to China with her family. And in Mao's Last Dancer, there is a 3-second, not even 3-second clip of a little toddler pushing the bellows in to keep the fire going in a little village. And Mum took me to see that movie, and she went to see it 3 times, I think, in the same week, because that was her job when she was in China as a little girl and a toddler under 5, to push the little bellows and keep the fire going in the house, in this, where lots of people were living in a village house. So that representation. And so, I mean, Genevieve and I have been talking a little bit about everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yes.
And for me, that was the first time I really saw myself in a film, and I actually watched it for the first time. It was my daughter who said, we need to watch this. And she'd already seen it. And we were sitting together with my mum and myself and my daughter and my daughter's partner. Now, my daughter is queer. And so, here's this queer daughter in the story, and a woman my age, and then there's the my mum, who's that older generation. And my mum said to me, and I was talking to someone else just the other day about this, that Mum said to me at the time, she said, oh, there's a lot going on in this movie, isn't there? Because there's all these very parallel universes and opportunities. But actually, for women, for Asian women, there's only been one way. And that one way is you must have, you must marry well, you must have children, and you must have a son, and you must subsume all your desires and ambition to supporting the family. That's you. You must not have any other aspirations. And already my mum had chosen a different path from that. So she already knew that at least it was, but there were no other options. And yet now Asian women are taking all these different alternative universes. They're all open to us. So everything, everywhere, all at once, it was just resonated for me so much. It feels like, yes, it's coming together. Michelle Yeoh wins the SAG Award, 60 years old, and she's had a whole lifetime of work, and she wins it for this one. And she holds up the trophy and says, this is for all the little girls who look like me. And I think that's what Genevieve and I have been doing, not really knowing, but we've been wanting to do this for women's horror and in literature, is hold up the sign and say, this is for all the little girls who look like us, and who want a way through, who are looking for a different way, to express their desires and their needs and their ambitions, because Asian women have not been allowed to be wanting. We are not allowed to want. We are not allowed to. We mustn't be ambitious for ourselves. It's the community, it's the family that's important. And so, in a way, that kind of sort of culminated in this whole movement. It's really it's a metaphor for it, isn't it, Genevieve?
It is, yeah, and I think beyond the little girls, it's also for the wider audience, saying this is us, and whether or not you agree or you feel empathy towards it, we're getting a chance to express it. And I think that's been incredible, but also very well received. We've had, haven't we, Lee? We've had so much support from the horror community, where people are saying that even though they don't share the same skin color or whatever, they're saying that they can understand, or that a lot of the fear in it resonates with them, and that they can feel the same thing, whether or not they're from Italian backgrounds, where that the sense of family is incredibly powerful as well. They said we feel the same pressure, and we feel the same, like there's a lot of echoes in the cultural experiences as well. But we've had male readers saying that they learned so much from reading Black Cranes and then also Tortured Willows, which has been, I think, very, very exciting, considering what was happening at the time with Me Too, and with the anti-Asian perspectives surrounding COVID. So yeah.
And we should probably give a shout out to our publishers,
Yes.
because, Jennifer Barnes said to me when, our original publisher for Black Trains has now closed, and Jennifer Barnes said, no, I just want it. She's just, with Raw Dog Screaming Press, I don't care. She said, I just want it. So that was wonderfully affirming. There are publishers who are interested in this work, but also we added an afterword to this particular collection, and it's written by Nancy Holder, of course, who huge voice in feminist horror, of course, and Lifetime Achievement Award in horror last year. And Nancy's written a wonderful essay which kind of bears witness to our experience and shows just how she has so much empathy for this and where it has applied to her in her life. So it's an incredibly powerful essay, and it's surprising because, obviously we had Alma Katsu write the foreword for Black Cranes, which was so powerful. And even Alma was frightened about it, because when she wrote, she said, I think I've been, a little bit too brutal, and please pull me back if I'm too. And it was such a feisty, powerful essay. And Genevieve went, and I took it straight to my mum and I said, what do you think? And she said, I think this is perfect. I think this this is what you need to preface this collection. And don't be frightened. Mum kind of said, do it. And so I went back to Genevieve and I said, you know what, I think it is absolutely, we need to give voice, we need to let Alma have her voice. And Genevieve, by that time, had already come around. I think she'd read it a couple of times. It was already here. Yeah, I think so too. And so we went back to Alma and didn't change it at all. And then Nancy came with this just, after reading Black Cranes, we invited her to do the afterward, and she had heard about the book. She wanted to be part of it. She'd read it before. We asked her. And so she read it again and said, yes, please. And the essay she brought us was just beautiful. And it does show that outsider response. And I don't mean outsider because Nancy truly is a sister. She truly is a Crane sister. She does get us. But that sort of, I'm here to bear witness and show you what I know of this and why it resonates for me. And I think that explains a little bit more. So I hope everyone will pick up the new version from Raw Dog Screaming Press and read Nancy's afterward, because it does really show a little bit how the response has been, and from people not of Asian cultures, and that perhaps will sum up a little bit what Genevieve's trying to explain about the unfathomable response that we've received and why we just, how have people responded? And I think Nancy really sums it up perfectly. Would you agree, Genevieve?
I would, and I want to touch on Lisa Kroger's forward for Unquiet Spirits as well. And Lisa's her forward was essentially that at first she was asking who was she to write this forward, but then she took the perspective of, well, she's witness. She's here to witness this movement or these voices, And that was incredibly powerful as well. I think that we have all these allies that are in the horror community. And I think that's been a huge part of the success, is that we've had people, publishers that believed in the project, publishers that have backed us, and also people that are willing to do reviews and to champion the stories and the poetry and now the essays. I think that's been incredible.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing this book with us, and not only, your experiences putting it together, but your experience of its reception and, the work it's done in the world, and also the work that it's done in your lives. It's like, this has been a really lovely conversation, and I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us,
you.
Jenn, and for asking such good questions. Enjoyed it. It was really fun. I told you we wouldn't have any trouble keeping a conversation going. Genevieve and I can never stop talking once we get started.
I loved it. Thank you so much. Okay, listeners, please pick up Black Cranes. This is an absolutely gorgeous collection of stories that are going to just impress you one after the other. And it has a gorgeous, gorgeous cover. It is like, oh, just amazing. Thank you so much for listening. And it is time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.